Yes. Every OBS Powerstroke 7.3 owner's least favorite job. Turbo removal and installation. It's not a fun job, but I thought I would take a minute and give you a couple of tips to make this a little bit easier. So, tip number one is, when you do this, you need to replace those two O-rings right there. Otherwise, there's a high likelihood that you will put it all back together and have an oil leak. So oil supply and return O-rings both need to be replaced as part of this project. We'll get a pick and dig that other one out. Tip number two is to get yourself one of these. Use this for the collector bolts. This is a 10mm, so this is not the right size. I picked these up at Lowe's. These are Cobalt. So again, decent home grade tools, not real expensive, but 15mm is what you need in order to remove the nuts from those bottom two studs. The top two bolts are pretty easy. You can pretty much get straight on those with an impact gun or a ratchet. Sometimes impact is nice because it has a tendency to break the rust loose a little bit. I think those bolts are stainless steel, so they don't rust into place real bad. They're just not super easy to reach. But those two nuts on those studs are pretty miserable to get to. And unless you have a 15mm wrench that you cut off or a stubby set, this guy's going to be your best friend. With a 15mm swivel socket, you can actually just put a ratchet on those and spin them out. So swivel socket in 15mm is your best friend. A couple other tips is that those back two pedestal bolts, getting those two pedestal bolts out can be a challenge because you basically have to do it by feel. And the best way to get those 10mm bolts out is 1/4" ratchet, the universal on a 10mm socket. I believe that's a 8" extension on this one. Just kind of gets you up to where you can get your hand on the ratchet easily. But this will dangle down through there in front of the collector, in front of the up pipes. That'll get you down on top of those two bolts and let you spin them out. And there are those two bolts. And what you're looking at there is actually the next tip. When you go to reassemble this thing, you've got those two O-rings that are sitting on top of the block. Lines up with those two holes, the oil supply and oil return. You can't be scooting things around or you knock those O-rings off, and once again, you have a big leak, you have a big mess, and you get to do the job over. So a couple of tips are, get a rubber band, put it on those two bolts, because what happens is if you don't have that in there, those bolts stick down like this. You're scooting it around in there trying to line it up, and you knock those O-rings off. With that rubber band in there, it'll actually hold the bolts in the holes. You have to have them in the holes because you can't slip them past the exhaust collector to get them into place after the turbo's in there. So you have to have them in the pedestal, but with that rubber band on there, it'll hold them from dropping down. You see that? See how it holds them up in the holes? Just the tension of the rubber band is enough to keep them up out of the way. So do that. And then, you know, this is kind of your setup that you're going to reach down through here and get onto those bolts with. So once it's down into place, you can just reach down in there, pull that rubber band off, and go to town. So that those tips will make it a lot easier. These two collector nuts down here at the bottom, those are a chore. Those are not fun. But that swivel socket makes it a lot easier. Makes it a heck of a lot easier. Another tip is when you're doing this, unless you live in a cold climate and for some reason you think you really need it, delete that exhaust back pressure valve. It's a real easy job to do. Basically, there is a shaft that sticks up through there. Hang on, I got the parts here someplace. Yeah, there we go. So, this shaft sticks up through the bottom. Has this butterfly valve on it. This just acts as a flapper inside the outlet, like such. Restricts enough of the gases coming out of the turbo that it's supposed to aid in warming up the engine on a cold start. It's debatable whether or not it even does any good. A lot of times what happens is either this piston stops working, or the solenoid valve that controls it that goes down in here stops working, and you'll get that thing closing when it shouldn't be closing. Or you'll have an issue with the sensor that tells whether it's open or shut, and you get this thing closing when it shouldn't. Even when it's open, it does present a little bit of restriction. Basically, you've got that shaft sticking up through the outlet of the turbo with that flapper valve on it, even in the open position. And some guys say it's a 30% obstruction. I don't know about that, but it's in the way, so you can't remove it. So all you do is you reach in there, grind the backs off the rivets. Once those rivets are ground off, get a punch, knock it out of the shaft. You know, this was all together like this, like that. Just knock those rivets out, separate the two pieces. This shaft then falls out the bottom of the housing, and you can plug it with a 3/4 inch freeze plug. That thing costs about 50 cents if you go to your Napa store. So pound it in there. You may have to flare it out just a little bit to make it fit tight, but that will help you delete the exhaust back pressure valve and free up your exhaust a little bit. So just a couple of tips to make this job a little easier.